And now, with all the very latest from around the world and here at home, it's the ITV News at 10.
The astronauts are aboard and the countdown clock is ticking. Artemis 2 is barely an hour away from a launch that might pave the way for missions to Mars.
It is like the hand of God coming down and ripping you off the planet. And it's like you're on a runaway train going 1,000 miles an hour and you just keep accelerating.
But in the meantime, the very idea of it is inspiring some harmony back on Earth.
When America in particular is so divided, we are all here for the same thing, and that's bringing us together. How powerful is that?
For all little kids and everything, they're going to look at this and say, hey, I want to be an astronaut again. That's how I felt when I was a kid.
Artemis 2 will not land on the moon, of course, but its launch is seen as part of a new superpower space race. We'll talk to Debbie in Beijing about how it is going down in China. Also on News at 10 tonight. President Trump confirms he's thinking of trying to pull out of NATO, as Sir Keir Starmer says he will be tilting us closer to Europe. Experts predict food inflation here could hit 12% this year.
I would have thought that was the most important question out of the two. I'd go for that one.
Never seen before footage of Princess Diana in our latest episode of Reporting History, and
this is an apple too, and this is an apple also.
Apple is 50. We look at the company's phenomenal journey.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. In the history of our planet, that first landing of men on the moon in 1969 was, and still is, one of the greatest stories ever told. Tonight in Florida, 4 astronaut successors, 1 woman and 3 men, are strapped into their cramped seats ready for liftoff. It's supposed to be happening in just over an hour. In the last few minutes, NASA has mentioned a technical hitch. Assuming, though, it is all systems go, the mission will not include moon boots on the ground this time, but it will pave the way for those who follow in their footsteps to plant their feet on the moon's stony surface in missions to come, and ultimately leapfrog to Mars. NASA's live pictures show the astronauts' tiny capsule perched on top of 3 million litres of fuel, the most powerful crewed rocket ever constructed. It will take them from Cape Canaveral to the far side of the moon. During their 10-day journey, they will travel further from Earth than anyone has ever done before.
DC copies, Commander.
ITV, Mystical 212 with subject. And good to have you on board. Good luck today.
For NASA, with the 4 astronauts now settled into their Orion capsule, this is the most significant day for a generation.
Go ahead, NTD.
Yeah, we're going to do another cleanup on those suit leak check messages that we got.
A thrilling moment in which humans will once again escape low Earth orbit and head back to the moon.
Side hatch of the crew module.
The communication and flight systems are now configured for an imminent launch.
Astronauts are in the capsule. They're ready to go.
The day began with an old NASA ritual of a card game.
Yeah, laughing, but very focused still. But when
to dispel any bad luck before they reach the rocket.
And here they are, NASA's Artemis 2 crew.
Then it was the walkout to say goodbye to family and friends.
Last chance to wave, last chance to get one smile.
Keeping a few meters apart to reduce the risk of any infection.
Oh, this must feel so special to the crew to see.
On the drive to the storied 39B launch pad, familiar to earlier generations of Apollo and Space Shuttle astronauts, NASA played the film Top Gun in the vehicle.
What's really neat, too, was that drive to the launch pad, that point of view to see what the crew is seeing as well.
Then it was time for the ride up the tower, to the crew access chamber for final suit preparations.
As they walk them through configuring their various consoles.
And now we're watching the crew walk across the crew access arm getting a beautiful view of Kennedy Space Center.
The 4 astronauts are Commander Reed Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, and mission specialist Christina Cook, and a Canadian, Jeremy Hansen.
Yes, I'll be sobbing with joy and emotional release from anticipating this for a long time.
Americans are responding, already gathering here to watch a launch that many hope allows this country to rediscover a sense of pride and of unity. Is there a sense it's sort of a bit like the Apollo missions did in the past? It's bringing Americans together?
I hope so, yes. That would be wonderful. That would be great. We were here for the Apollo launches, and we're able to come here and watch, and that was super exciting. I hope that the rest of the country is excited about this one, because it's really neat.
And opens up whole new possibilities of exploration.
For all little kids and everything, they're going to look at this and say, hey, I want to be an astronaut again. You know, that's how I felt when I was a kid, you know, and now they have dreams again.
At this particular moment in time, when America in particular is so divided over so many things, you've got 500,000 people here, right here today, that are all here united for the same thing, and it doesn't matter our political persuasion, what color we are, our religion, our sexual orientation, nothing. We are all here for the same thing, and that's bringing us together. And how powerful is that?
We'd like to dedicate the first steps of Apollo 17 to all those who made it possible.
It has been 53 years since the astronauts of Apollo 17 last visited the moon.
We'd like to share a piece of this rock with so many of the countries throughout the world.
It's a long gap in human exploration that has deeply troubled NASA, many fearing a loss of America's pioneering role in pushing into deep space. The hopes of a new generation of spacefarers are now centered on these 4 astronauts.
OTC ascent switch configuration complete.
Alongside the most powerful rocket in history,
OTC copies. Thank
and
you.
the Orion capsule.
And Robert is at Cape Canaveral now. Robert, you hear 3 million litres of fuel, most powerful crewed rocket in history, and then potential technical hitch, and you get a bit nervous. Are we go or no go, do you think, for this launch?
Not entirely clear at the moment. NASA has identified that they are troubleshooting a problem with what they call the flight termination system, but still, as of now, Tom, the countdown is continuing, and as you can see all around me, hundreds of people are here at this location to view the launch, and hundreds of thousands more all along Florida's Atlantic coast to see this great space adventure. This is a test flight, so it'll be some time before we get to a lunar base and missions to Mars, but according to NASA, this is where it all begins.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll get more from Robert shortly, but first, Martin is here to talk us through the mission and what's at stake. Martin.
Yeah, well, look, here we've got the time, and that's when the window for launch opens. We've also got a live shot of Artemis, the largest crewed rocket, most powerful crewed rocket in history. The crew essentially is sitting on top of what is a giant firework filled with nearly 3 million litres of rocket fuel. And it is huge, 98 metres, that's 32 stories tall. To put it in context, it is the same height as the Elizabeth Tower, which holds Big Ben. And at blast off, it's going to generate 55 times more thrust than Concorde. It is like the hand of God coming down and ripping you off the planet. And it's like you're on a runaway train and you go from 0 to 17,500 miles an hour in 8.5 minutes. Now, once in space, after a couple of laps of Earth's orbit, the next set of boosters will fire up, propelling the team 250,000 miles away from Earth, the furthest any human has ever been. Once around the far side of the moon, they'll lose communications with Earth for about 40 minutes before being slingshot back home. And they'll approach Earth's atmosphere, get this, at an eye-watering 7 miles every second. If they get the angle wrong, it could be fatal. Too steep, and they'll burn up in Earth's atmosphere. Too shallow, there's a risk they could bounce off and be lost in space forever. But after 10 days, hopefully they will safely splash back down into the Pacific, bringing us one step closer to walking on the moon once more. But the real prize is to build a permanent base on a large crater on the south pole of the moon. It's ideally located for communications with Earth, sunshine to charge solar panels, and vitally, ice which could be used to make rocket fuel for future missions to Mars. And it is also, as Robert alluded to, about staking a claim to some lunar real estate. Astronauts are trained in geology. There's no secret, Tom, that there are minerals on the moon that contentiously people may want to try and mine sometime in the future.
Martin, thank you very much indeed. Well, there is an awful lot at stake, and let's go back to Robert at Cape Canaveral. Robert, this is a big moment for space travel, for America. And, you know, this is, as we said just now, not the moment you want to hear about a technical hitch. What do you think happens now, and when might we know more?
Look, I think this is going to be such a complex launch of essentially a new system that, you know, it was always likely there might be some technical hitch. But let's be clear, Tom, right now this countdown is continuing. They're working through the problem, and I think they're relatively optimistic that their engineers and testing teams can figure this out. I think the interesting dimension here, in a way, is just talking to ordinary people. As you saw in my report, there is a huge sort of yearning among Americans for a great sort of unifying and patriotic project. And certainly, sort of, I think unspoken here is, yes, this is about a base on the moon and it's about missions to Mars, but it's also trying to provide Americans a project that they can unify over. And I think in the subtext of that is this great rivalry now with China. Look, in the 1960s and 70s, it was the superpower rivalry with the USSR that drove these space launches. Now I think there is a sense of a growing military, commercial, and even a cultural rivalry with China. So, as I say, look, NASA is keen for this launch to happen. They've got other windows they could go to. But for now, this countdown continues, and they continue to troubleshoot this technical problem they have out on the launch.
Okay, Robert, thank you very much indeed. And I said at the start we'd be talking to Debbie in China. We just momentarily lost her. We'll try and get her back and ask her what she thinks the Chinese authorities are making of everything that Robert just said there. Now, President Trump has implied he has something significant to say about his war on Iran by planning a national television address in a few hours' time. It could at least clear up some of the usual contradictions at the heart of his pronouncements today. If he is calling it a day, that won't come a moment too soon for his allies in NATO, who he threatened to split from. He's actually barred by law from doing that, a law first proposed by his Secretary of State, no less, but that hasn't dimmed his rhetoric. It left Sir Keir Starmer saying he'd pivot to a closer security relationship with Europe, and it is not a moment too soon for the people of Iran.
American and Israeli warplanes continue to operate in Iranian airspace with impunity, bombing at will. Unable to defend itself, Iran keeps on lashing out instead, attacking its Arab neighbours, countries which thought they had cordial relations with Tehran. This afternoon, thousands of regime supporters gathered in the Iranian capital for a Republican Guard funeral. The Iranians in charge want to show they remain undefeated, but President Trump does not see it that way and appears to be preparing to call a halt.
We have had regime change. Now, regime change was not one of the things I had as a goal. I had one goal. They will have no nuclear weapon. And that goal has been attained. They will not have nuclear weapons. But we're finishing the job, and I think within maybe 2 weeks, maybe a couple of days longer.
Mr. Trump says he's willing to walk away even in the absence of a resolution to the Strait of Hormuz impasse. He seems happy to bequeath that headache to NATO because he feels betrayed by the alliance's refusal to help attack Iran. Asked by The Telegraph if he would reconsider NATO membership, Mr. Trump said, "Oh yes, I would say it's beyond reconsideration. I was never swayed by NATO. I always knew they were a paper tiger, and Putin knows that too, by the way." Asked about those criticisms this morning, the Prime Minister appeared unmoved.
NATO is the single most effective military alliance the world has ever seen, and it has kept us safe for many decades. Whatever the pressure on me and others, whatever the noise, I'm going to act in the British national interest in all the decisions that I make.
If President Trump does call a unilateral ceasefire, the Europeans and the Gulf Arabs are poised to inherit a mess, and one very much not of their own making. John Irvine, News at 10, Tel Aviv.
So, where does President Trump's latest threat to pull out of NATO leave Britain our closer military ties with Europe the solution? And Harry is here to answer this unanswerable question. Good luck with that, Harry. I mean, listen, we can see the tectonic plate shifting, can't we? America is clearly becoming, at the moment at least, an unreliable ally. I mean, President Trump's telling us he's an unreliable ally. Keir Starmer keeps talking about closer ties with Europe, but he never specifies what that actually means. What do you think it means?
Well, we've seen President Trump criticising not just Keir Starmer, but other European leaders as well. And in recent weeks, we've seen a bit more of Keir Starmer, in as much as he can do, stand up to President Trump. And today, when I asked him about the tweets from President Trump, these messages about possibly leaving NATO, Keir Starmer says, whatever the noise, I'm going to act in the British national interest. Now, tomorrow the UK will host this meeting of 35 countries, mainly European, some Gulf countries as well, to talk about some sort of military operation that could, at some stage, police the Strait of Hormuz if it reopens. Crucially, the US isn't attending that meeting. At the same time as this, in recent months, we've seen the Labour government trying to pursue closer ties with Europe, trying to remove trade barriers. And there's this big UK-EU summit expected this summer. Today, Keir Starmer says it's increasingly clear that the UK's long-term national interest requires closer partnership with our allies in Europe and with the European Union. Now, there are some in Labour that think there is a clear political benefit for this government for trying to pursue closer ties with the EU at a time when Reform and the Conservatives are seen as being very supportive of Brexit. So there is this big shift towards Europe going on at the same time as ties with the US are becoming more strained. That's been going on in the background. I think what we saw today for the first time was Keir Starmer articulating that. But as you say, still big questions about what that looks like in the long term.
Okay, Harry, thank you very much indeed. Now, price rises caused by the war in Iran for things like petrol, diesel and heating oil have come at a bad time. Is there ever a good one? You may ask, but bills for council tax, water and mobile phones go up today too. And according to research shared with us, food costs are going up as well. Experts from the Food Systems Institute are predicting food inflation could hit a whopping 12% this year, like cucumbers and tomatoes grown in heated greenhouses.
This farm in Ely supplies most of Britain's major supermarkets all year round. The tomatoes and cucumbers are grown using fertiliser, and 200,000 square metres of greenhouses need to be lit and heated. It's energy intensive, and the spike in prices triggered by the war in the Middle East is being felt.
We are worried, we are concerned. We just don't know what we're going to pay for gas from one day to the next. 1 minute it's up at £1.38, the next day it's down at £1.20, based on an announcement that Donald Trump makes on his social media feed.
When fossil fuel prices rise, food becomes more expensive to grow, to transport, to process, to package, to store. If the war persists, we could be heading back to double-digit inflation. Annual food inflation surged to 19% after Russia invaded Ukraine. It has since fallen back to 3%. But several agricultural economists have told ITV News it could rise as high as 12% again if energy prices remain elevated. The price of greenhouse-grown fruit, vegetables and fresh herbs is likely to rise first and within weeks. Thereafter, tea, coffee, sugar, jam, much of it imported, will be affected, followed by rice, bread, pasta, eggs and chicken. In theory, the full impact on lamb and beef prices won't be felt for several months, but all of this is highly uncertain.
I think given the conflict that we're facing, some form of food price inflation will occur. How quickly that will occur, how sustained that will be, very much depends on how quickly things are resolved.
The surge in energy prices affects arable and livestock farmers too, here and around the world. The UK produces just over half of the food that we eat, which means what we pay and what's on the shelves depends on harvests in Brazil, the United States, continental Europe, Australia, Northern Africa. Put simply, we're far from being self-sufficient.
Mr. Roberts, are food prices going to rise?
Today, the bosses of Sainsbury's, Tesco, Morrison's and most of the other big supermarkets were called to meet the Chancellor. The government can't set retail prices, but it can adjust taxes. It can't prevent the hit to our living standards. It can try to soften the blow. John Hill's News at 10 in Ely.
No one knew it then, but 7 months after this celebrated image of Princess Diana flashed around the world, she was incredibly, sadly, tragically dead. It said so much about what might have been, primarily, of course, about the loss to her family. It also recognised the campaigning role she had established for herself outside of the royal family, here against landmines in Angola. For the latest in our podcast series, Reporting History, our Africa correspondent at the time, Steve Scott, has been reminding me of that visit and talking through a never-seen-before and controversial section of an interview he did with her on the history-making trip.
Today, the princess met Angola's victims. 13-year-old Sandra, an orphan, lost her leg 2 years ago. Not for the last time today, the princess was visibly moved.
We've all done lots and lots of press trips, with politicians, with members of the royal family. They don't behave like Diana behaved. It just looked very natural. She's very comfortable with people, and people are very comfortable with her for whatever reason it is.
This was so massive. That image of her with Sandra, the girl sitting on her lap, I mean, that went everywhere.
Instinctively, she knew if Sandra was sitting on her lap and people were taking photographs of that would be powerful. That would help her campaign.
Now, the moment these images are broadcast, a political backlash starts. A government minister described her as a loose cannon, and kind of a reminder in a way of what she was up against.
We'd been told about that, and we knew we had to ask her about it.
But I'm only trying to highlight a problem that's going on all around the world. That's all.
It's been said, though, that you're aligning yourself with Labour policy. Do you think that's wise?
Labour? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what
We
you're...
have really to keep the programme going. I learned later on that actually it really upset her because she hadn't been briefed, she wasn't prepared for it, and she wished she could have handled it in a different way.
She was led through a minefield today by a British team who are making the area safe. Then it was her turn to destroy just one of the 15 million explosives still scattered across the country.
1, 2, 3, firing.
This is some of the most famous footage of the era, right? Maybe even of the whole decade.
The first time she did the walk, it was difficult to get a clear shot of her because she was surrounded by people from the Halo Trust. But at the end of it, we said to her, is there any way you could do that again, but on your own? Because we couldn't quite get absolutely no problem at all. And thank goodness we did, because that's where that final image came from of her, looking quite lonely in a very dangerous place, but doing something that we'd never seen her do anything like before.
Well, let's get to the last day and the interviews.
What did you make of yesterday's political storm back in England?
I saw it merely as a distraction because I'm not a political figure. I am a humanitarian figure. And always have been and always will be.
Now, there's some off cuts of the interview which never got broadcast, so let's just play it here because it's fun.
I would have thought that was the most important question out of the two. I'd go for that one. No, I mean the one saying I'm not a political figure.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I got it right. As you heard in the background, the team were trying to stop her answering that question, but she wasn't having any of it. And she was being very playful with not having any of it as well. You can tell, but just the look at her saying, no, I think that is the one you want to be asking.
Her next trips will be to other mine-plagued countries, probably Cambodia, Afghanistan, or even Bosnia.
The really sad thing is that 7 months later she was dead.
Once it had sunk in that obviously it had happened, I just found it just very, very sad. I mean, she was making a mark She had won people's hearts over again, but she was doing something good, and I just think it's incredibly sad that a woman who could have made a big difference was now no longer with us.
And you can scan the QR code on screen to watch our full conversation in the latest episode of our Reporting History series, where we explore more about the effect and impact of Diana's death on her beloved sons. It's also available on ITVX, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. It's a great series. I do recommend it. Now, like it or not, and millions do, for half a century, devices made by Apple have organised and enhanced lives right around the world. There are almost 2.5 billion out there, believe it or not. What started out as the Apple Computer Company is 50 years old today.
This is an Apple II, and this is an Apple also. This Apple is the original personal computer.
Back when the idea of a personal computer was new, so was the Apple brand. But over the last 50 years, it's created products that have transformed technology and our lives.
Well, what we're going to do is get rid of all these buttons and just make a giant screen.
They've been so popular, people have queued and rushed to buy them. This is the garage where Apple began, and a few years later, the Macintosh computer was born.
This is the original Mac from 1984. This got a lot of people into computing because it was just so user-friendly. Apple products have been just extraordinary tools that allow us to be incredibly creative in our bedrooms, in our offices, and now in the palm of our hands.
But not every product has been a success. There was the expensive all-in-one TV radio computer, and a precursor to the iPad that was mocked by The Simpsons.
Hey, Dolph, take a memo on your Newton. Beat up Martin.
Apple has also faced legal cases over its decision to slow down older iPhones, and has denied accusations of ripping off customers with its iCloud storage system. And experts are questioning whether AI will threaten its market control.
Most of the innovation in consumer tech these days is going on under the hood. It's things like better AI services, it's better chips, it's being able to do things better in an existing format, and that's quite a challenge.
For 5 decades, Apple has dominated tech design. Given how much has changed in this time, it's difficult to imagine what our phones and laptops could look like in another half a century. Ellie Pitt, News at 10.
Let's return now to tonight's launch of Artemis 2. NASA say they have resolved that fault we mentioned, and the countdown continues, as we heard earlier in the programme. The hunt for lunar minerals is driving America's stepped-up race into space. In the Apollo era, it was ideological rivalry with Russia that fueled competition. In the Artemis era, it is China, and Debbie is, I'm very pleased to say, back with us. Debbie, how is all of this being viewed in China?
Well, Tom, there will be thousands of people here watching this Artemis launch. Space fans, yes, but also the hundreds of thousands working in China's space industry. President Xi has consistently set exploration of the cosmos as a national priority, as one of the key ambitions of his Chinese dream. And in the last 5 years, China has become the first country to get samples from the far side of the moon, and has also launched and is maintaining its own space station. But of course, the priority is Chinese boots on the moon. They claim to have already tested the launch rocket, the spacecraft, and the lunar lander, putting them on track to meet or beat the Artemis 3, which is now scheduled for 2028. But as you heard from Martin, the real priority in this space race is a presence on the moon. And this year, China will launch the first of 2 robotic missions to the moon. The first to explore for water, the second to test whether they can have the ability to 3D print bricks from lunar soil. Just try and get your head around that.
Okay, Debbie, thank you very much indeed. And as tonight's dramatic countdown continues, in an era of war, death and chaos, Artemis 2 is a positive statement of noble ambition. It stands on its launch pad in Florida as a totem to the finest of human qualities: ingenuity, endeavour, bravery. That bravery is personified, of course, in the 4 astronauts willing to risk everything for the advancement of science. Not for them footsteps on the moon, perhaps, but an unselfish hope that others will benefit from where they have boldly gone. They will travel further than humans have ever gone before, leaving loved, anxious ones to watch and wait. Good night.